Before I tell my story, let me set the scene. It was the summer of 1996 and I was 15 years old. I grew up in a neighborhood in a typical Swedish university town with my dad. I was a pretty well-behaved kid and I did good in school. I didn't smoke or drink, and in fact, I didn't want to go to parties. I didn't even have a boyfriend, but I did have a crush on a boy at school. And I felt pretty sure he was curious about me too, but we were both pretty shy people. This took place in the end of August, when the late summer nights start to slowly grow darker and the days shorter. It was a very hot summer though, and all the popular girls would wear white tight tops to show off a flat tummy. And one day I had bought one for myself, just to try and see what it was like to be a normal teenage girl. I had those silly shoes too, the Spice Girls inspired ones that sprained many ankles during that era. Afterwards, I wondered if the outfit is what started it all. Suddenly, I started to get notes. They were placed in the basket of my bicycle. Notes with messages such as, "I like your style," and growing into a woman before my eyes. I didn't tell anyone. I strongly suspected the idiot gang at school. 2 of them lived close to me, and I thought they were teasing me for changing my style. Teenage logic, we've all been there, right? To show them that I didn't care, I wore my new style all the damn time. One morning, I noticed that someone had stepped onto the flowers in the flower beds under several of our windows. I told my dad about it. He worried it was someone checking the place out, planning a break-in, and asked me to turn on the alarm whenever I was alone. Things had gone missing before. Insignificant things, but still, you never know. My dad owned a rather successful small business, and to celebrate the 10-year mark, he wanted to treat his employees to a weekend away, and I had booked a place up north in Kiruna. I was often used to being left alone at home. Sometimes his work demanded that he traveled for a week or so, and it wasn't a problem. Again, I was a good kid. And anyway, only a few houses down the street lived a couple of people that we knew, and they usually checked in on me if I was alone for many days. They had no kids of their own and often helped out with everyone else's. It was on the Saturday that it happened. I arrived home very late on my bicycle after having watched Cutthroat Island at a friend's place. I walked in the front door and noticed a draft. Had I forgotten to close the window before I left? Then I noticed that the alarm was turned off. Had I forgotten that too? I walked through the house to the living room when suddenly, Mr. W., the man from down the street, stood in front of me. "Hi there, kiddo. Did I scare you? I just came to check in on you." I found this strange since it was well past 1 o'clock at night and he smelled of alcohol. "I'm fine. I'm off to bed now," I said, and got the strangest feeling. Despite it being a hot summer night, I was shaking with cold. Something inside of me told me that this was an extremely dangerous situation. Something about it was off, as if he was wearing a mask, as if someone else was behind his eyes. Not the friendly Mr. W. that I had known my entire life. "Wine?" he said, and nodded in the direction of a wine bottle. I shook my head no. "I don't drink. My dad, you know," I said, and I tried to sound normal, but my voice didn't feel like my own. "Oh, you're almost a grown woman now. You can do as you wish," he continued, pouring wine into an unwashed glass. "I've been watching you. You have really grown." He kept telling me how beautiful I'd become, and how he had noticed my new clothes, and that I surely knew that it was an open invitation to men. "I'm a nice person, don't you think?" he asked. "I'll be good to you. You can trust me. I'll be real gentle." I started to back towards the front door, but he stops me by grabbing hold of my upper arm and pulling me towards him. "Don't be like that. No one likes a tease," he says. And when I try to break free, he laughs and goes, "Wanna play, huh?" I can play. It starts to shake me. I feel how much stronger he is than I, and realize I have to make him let go long enough for me to run. At this point, it is as if someone else has hijacked my brain, and I started saying and doing things that I wasn't even aware of until afterwards. "Yeah, I like to play," I hear myself say, and he smiles and starts to touch my hair. He dragged me off to the bedroom, and I tried to pretend to be into it. I had never had sex at this point, or even truly wanted to. I had no idea how to fake it, but I tried. The moment he tossed me down on the bed, I said, "You must go lock the front door and turn on the alarm," as I tried to look eager and not scared out of my mind. "Okay," he said. "Don't move." I was on my feet faster than I thought possible, and I locked the bedroom door from the inside. My plan had, however, not turned out as I had hoped. He had taken me to my dad's bedroom, not my bedroom. My room had a window that led out onto the roof of the garage, and from there I could have jumped. But this room had no such escape. But it did have a phone. My brain had forgotten the number to the police, and the only number I remembered was my dad's work phone. He answered almost right away. My dad phoned the cops from his other phone, and I still had him on the line while Mr. W. tried to open the lock with a screwdriver. shouting at me and promising me to gut me like a fish when he got in. My dad also phoned another neighbor, Mr. K, who used to be in the military and often bragged about how he would treat any burglar to a trip to the emergency room if given the chance. Mr. K arrived before the police and he didn't break his promise. But the sound of the fighting outside the room was terrible, and I had no idea what was going on outside, or even who was winning the fight. Mr. K was an old guy, but fit. But what if Mr. W had a weapon still, like the screwdriver? I don't think I dared to breathe until Mr. K asked me if I was okay. And I didn't dare get out of that room before the police arrived. And even then, I was almost unable to move, as if my mind had escaped my body. A man who I had known since I was a toddler had suddenly started to stalk me and planned to use the fact that my dad was out of town to assault me, and God knows what else. I trusted him, and I had been so wrong. I still have trust issues today. I spoke to his wife once long after the incident. She had filed for divorce and told me that the reason she refused to have children with him was that deep down she feared that they would have not been safe in their home. This happened last summer and started pretty much a year ago. I am a guy who spends quite a lot of time in front of my computer, probably too much, and my room back at my parents' place has a window facing the road in front of the house. My computer is located next to the window, and when I'm sitting by it, I have that window to my right side. This means that if someone walks past the house, they can see me by the computer, and I often tend to look out the window whenever I see someone walking past, in the corner of my eye. No big deal. So this all started when I noticed a woman, somewhere near her 20s, maybe early 30s, walking by quite often, as in 5 to 10 times every day. No big deal, of course, she probably just lives nearby, I thought, which I later found out that she did. But this woman had a very uncomfortable look to her. It didn't look like she had a shower in a while, and she had this extreme smile to her face, constantly, as if someone had stapled her face into that expression. I didn't think much about it until I noticed that she started trying to make eye contact with me. Since she walked by my window so often, I often caught her in the corner of my eye and unintentionally looked at her. Every time she got eye contact, she would start giggling and laughing uncontrollably. This went on for a week or two. I just thought she was mentally ill or something, to be honest, and I didn't think much of it. But one day, she walked past an insane amount of times. At least 20 times in a couple of hours, and each time she was constantly looking in my window when walking by. This is when I started getting uncomfortable. After unintentionally getting eye contact again, I quickly turned my eyes to the computer again, only to see in the corner of my eye that she has stopped, standing outside my window and looking right at me, laughing uncontrollably with her creepy smile on her face. I quickly pull the curtains and I try to ignore it when I hear the doorbell. I open the door and there she is. I'm alone at home and I start to get some serious creeps. I was at the time babysitting my friend's poodle and picking it up to use it as some kind of protection. Stupid, I know. I say, "Hi," and she responds with a very, very happy hello. She then says, "Now it's your turn." I have no idea what she wants and I only respond with, "Okay." She then starts laughing, like a lot, as in she just heard the best joke of her entire life. I start panicking and I shut the door after quickly telling her to leave. I tell my parents when they come home, and it turns out that this woman is an old student of my mother. She says that she is mentally ill and that I shouldn't worry. She is supposedly nice. Her visits outside my window continue every day, and I tell my parents again that I feel uncomfortable. Then they try to talk to her to see what's up. My mom decides to ask her why she's doing this, and the woman tells her that her and I have some kind of supernatural connection in our heads, and that her and I have conversations with each other through some kind of telepathic way. We are made for each other and madly in love. That's when my parents are getting concerned. Her visits continue on a daily basis, and we visit the police to see what can be done. Their answer is that we can't do shit because of stupid laws in my country. She often rang my doorbell, but I had the sense to not answer. I noticed that as time went on, she got worse and worse mentally. She started to show aggressive behavior against my parents when they asked her to leave. I have actually never seen my dad so uncomfortable and overprotective as he was at this time. He was worried as well. One day, something happened that was enough for me. It was Friday night and I was home alone. I was watching TV and I heard a strange noise from the street. I peeked out the window and there she was, outside my window dancing and screaming and singing and doing all kinds of strange things. put all the lights out in my house and I pretended not to be home, but I could still hear her. She was outside still. My neighbors ended up calling me several times, asking if I was okay, and I said I was, but I wasn't. I was scared. My parents were hours from coming home, and all I could do was watch TV, pretending not to be home. She stayed for an hour or two before leaving, and the week after, me and my parents decided to take action. We visited different mental hospitals, or whatever you call them, and tried to tell them what happened. But there was one problem. They didn't have her as a patient and couldn't help us. Neither could the police. To make the rest of the story short, it's been way too long already. This continued for the entire summer, and towards the end, she would often spy on our house, playing some sick game with a child that she had started hanging out with. At this point, she was kind of scared of us because she knew we had contacted the police and different doctors, and they were shouting things such as, "You see that house? Watch out for them, or they'll call the police." And she and the child would run and come back minutes later, repeating the same thing. The police have visited our block several times, hunting her when she is clearly out of control. There are so many incidents I can tell you about this story, but it would take way too long to tell everything. I don't live at home anymore, and I haven't been bothered by her since. Except the time that she tried to contact me on Facebook. I blocked her instantly. That was my summer of 2012. Not the best of my life. I've posted this before as a reply to a comment. It's been playing on my mind because last week it came up in my time hop and I thought I'd share it with you guys. So last summer I booked a glamping trip in the next county over. The website looked beautiful. A campsite of 6 large yurts outside a lovely little village. Coincidentally, I had driven through that village before as it's close to a really nice historic castle I like to visit occasionally. So we pay our money and my husband and 2 kids and I pitch up. It's one of the last weekends of the summer, and it was lovely weather. The campsite was on a small hill, and the people who owned it lived on top of the hill in their farmhouse. We were checking in on a Sunday for 2 nights, as we were shift workers at the time. We passed other people checking out, and they all looked happy. The owners of the site showed us down to our yurt, and mentioned that we were the only ones on the site for our stay at this time, it being a Sunday. We were happy with that, to be honest, because with 2 young kids, it meant that they could make noise if they wanted, and we would disturb nobody. When she showed us around, she didn't say the yurt door didn't lock, but none of them did. Which was okay, I guess, because you don't lock a tent, right? The place was in its own mini wooded area, and it was absolutely beautiful. The owner also mentioned the kids would be safe to wander because they had perimeter fences because of their dogs. The first night was fun. We had a barbecue, and the kids played and went down to sleep at about 8. I found it hard to sleep, but I often do somewhere new. There was only patchy phone coverage, so we read until we fell asleep. Next morning, my husband seems a bit out of sorts, but I asked him if he was alright, and he says, "Yup, I'm fine." So I left it. We went out for the day and had a great time. Whole day was blazing hot, and then we got back. We were washing up after dinner, and the kids were playing, and a shadow came over the whole place. I felt eyes on me, and it went really cold. Honestly, it felt like something bad was going to happen. I felt dread hit me. We already paid to stay, but I pulled my husband to one side and said that we have to leave right now. I don't know why, I just got a horrible feeling. Please, let's just go home. Normally he'd try to talk me out of something like this, but he didn't. He started getting the kids together and I packed our stuff. We went to the farmhouse with the couple who owned it, or sat outside playing with their dogs. My husband started loading up the car, while I apologized to them and explained we needed to leave because our youngest was feeling ill. They said how sorry they were about it, and then just as I turned to leave, the man asked if my husband had been outside the house last night at about 3 or 4 in the morning. I said no, he hadn't left my side all night. I would have woken up and noticed. He asked me if I was sure. By this point, my husband was by my side and answered that no, he hadn't, and why. Well, says the guy, the security lights came on and the dog started barking, and when we looked outside, there was a man wandering around, who then turned around and walked back down the direction of the yurts. They assumed it was my husband. We both said it wasn't, and we said our goodbyes quickly. I tore out of that place in the car, and then about a quarter mile down the road, my husband turned to me and said, "You're right. I was quiet this morning. I didn't say anything because I thought you'd take the piss. I wanted to use the bathroom in the wee hours, but as I was about to get up, I heard footsteps on the decking outside. Not hooves of something on 4 legs, something on 2 legs. I laid there as quiet as possible and hoped the kids wouldn't wake up or something. It still freaks me out now. During the midsummer, usually around the middle of July, me and a couple of my good friends, all the way through my childhood, always made time to go up to one of my friend's family's cabin, way up north in the forests of Minnesota. The cabin is located in Vermilion Lake. Throughout all of our young years, we would always go, for sure accompanied by my friend's dad. Kevin's dad, who owned the cabin himself, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once we were juniors in high school, we felt mature enough and old enough to go to the cabin on our own. Finally, without Kevin's dad or any other adult supervision that may have accompanied us. I would like to mention a little information in regards to my friend's cabin to help you picture the scenario. The cabin is very remote and very little based upon a very large-sized island. Other cabins were on the island, but the ones next to us that were closest to us was a solid quarter or a half mile away at least, which is my best guess, which you could get to by taking a man-made path around the island. I want to mention that to get to my friend's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island, as his cabin was on an island, and you'd have to take his boat across the lake about a half mile to even reach the cabin. The lake is pretty big. My mind always had a tendency to run around when sleeping there at night throughout all of my years, for it was all one level with 2 bedrooms next to one another, a kitchen and living room connected, and a bathroom in the back of the cabin. And where you slept in the cabin, there was always at least one window in each room with no curtain to it at all. So it was very easy to see outside to the woods and lake. And this is where my mind would run, as I always thought someone was peering in. Of course nobody ever was, but just my paranoia. I had been to this cabin a dozen times throughout my lifespan, and nothing had ever happened, and the older I got, the easier it was to sleep. We would usually stay a few weeks worth, or 4 or 5 nights. On the 3rd night during the trip, when we were there on our own finally, we had set up a campfire and had been drinking beer all night. We went out to his dock to gaze up at the stars and enjoy our buzz when we heard something out in the water that sounded like a fish jumping out to catch a bug or something. We quickly looked out at the lake with curiosity, wondering where the splash came from, having our poles ready 24/7. Thankfully, the moon was out that night, which helped to light up the lake. Otherwise it would be dark as black out there, with there being no city lights for miles upon miles, and we would not have been able to see anything on the lake. One of my friends, Ryan, began to point out saying, what the hell was that? After looking closely and finally spotting what he was pointing at, all I can describe is it simply looked like a head out in the middle of the lake, just floating about, staring at us directly. It was about 3/4 worth of a football field length out in the lake from the dock. There is no question that I couldn't make out its features. It had long black hair and very palish skin like a face, but couldn't make out the eyes, mouth, nose, or chin, as if it was just a blob of pale skin with long black hair over it. I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. The hairs on my legs and neck, and my arm all stood up, and I was paralyzed on the inside, ready to leave that moment. But we told ourselves it was just a loon, as these birds are very popular night drifters on the lake, and they do their hunting late. So it was possible that a loon all of a sudden popped up in the water after hunting a bit, or at least we tried to talk ourselves into that scenario. All of us now having the creeps and noticing it wasn't moving one bit, just treading water in its same place. We went back to our campfire, lit it even brighter, and headed back inside to drink more. I would like to mention that there was a staircase outside my friend's cabin, about 8 stairs in length down to the bottom where the fire pit was. We soon forgot about the head with the help of the beer, until I had to use the bathroom really bad, and the one inside was preoccupied. I just went outside to do my business since we were in the great outdoors. When I had been taking a pee and glancing out at the beautiful moonlit lake, I noticed that the black circle object was still there, but about 30 yards closer now, still looking as if it were staring right at me. I could easily see the nose on this thing's face. Again, it was very pale, like it hadn't seen the sun for years. A very, very uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went inside and told my other friends to come look quick. We all went outside to see that it's still there looking at us, as if this head was corked up at us with its chin in the air. Nobody dared go down to the dock anymore, and we immediately went back inside, ruling out that it probably wasn't a loon, because a loon wouldn't have tread the water in the same spot like that. Eventually, the current would have drifted it somewhere else in a rocking manner. For a loon to stay in the same spot for almost an hour or two made no sense to any of us. This head-like object was stiff as a board and not moving a single muscle, just staring up at us from the deck instead. There was no ripple effect at all in the lake from the object. we said it was just a log and went back in. I could tell everyone else felt uneasy too. A few hours would pass. It was super late into the night, and at this point we knew we needed to sleep. Being my curious self though, I looked back outside once more, and the black object had completely vanished, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, thinking that the log must have floated off or just hit shore somewhere. As we slept with the windows open that night, there was no AC in this cabin, and we had to open them up or we would fry in the cabin, with it being the middle of the summer. Me and my other buddy, Tommy, slept in the living room while my two other friends slept in the two separate bedrooms, with their doors wide open. Not being able to sleep but keeping my eyes peeled shut, I began to hear someone walking around at the bottom of the stairs to the cabin, around the campfire and at the bottom of the stairs. I thought I was about to shit bricks. No question, what or whoever I heard down there was on the dock now, pacing back and forth as it made the sound of a boot clicking on the wood. It was as if they weren't sure what to do with themselves because it lasted for about 3 minutes. Wanting to whisper to my buddy, but frozen in fear, I just kept my eyes shut and ears on full alert. The footsteps sounded like they took 2 steps up the deck stairs all of a sudden, but then turned around and sounded like they were sprinting out down the man-made path. After it sounded like the steps were long gone and a couple minutes had passed, I woke up Tommy asking if he heard the steps. Both of us sitting up, I was startled to see my friend Ryan walking out of his room and saying that we need to leave a minute after these steps vanished. He must have heard us talking, so he felt he could come out as well, but either way, he was waking us up regardless. Something was very disturbing about his expression, and I asked him why. He woke up my other friend Kevin in the other room and said that we needed to go. Get to the boat, it's time to go. He explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff, and I will never forget what he explained to me and my friends. He said that when he was turning sides on his bed to get more comfortable, he saw someone peeking in at the top right corner of his window, and he quickly shifted out of his view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin and black long hair down the window. Again, another thing I would like to add, when we look back at what we experienced, it chills us to the bone realizing that since this face was in the top right corner of the window, in my friend's room that he was sleeping in, this thing was either damn near 8 foot tall, standing on something like bricks trying to peek in, or was floating. Ryan then continued to say, "Let's go," very seriously. Absolutely disturbed the hell out of my mind and feeling like I was going to be sick, and then telling them what my friend and I heard in the living room, we all agreed and packed our stuff, and we booked it, not cleaning the cabin or anything. We always had to clean the cabin before leaving. We locked up, and as we headed down the stairs, we saw footprints in the dirt, heading off into the path and all around the cabin. We picked up our pace, getting to the boat, not knowing what was watching us or around us. We threw our stuff on the boat, untied it, and sped off. I didn't even think about the head in the water anymore, or even think to look in the water. My eyes were just glued to the island, trying to spot anything moving, but I saw nothing. When we had finally gotten our stuff packed, in the car, and our boat tied up, we hopped in the car and took off. We had been driving out about 10 miles, and out of the blue, Ryan, who said he saw the person outside his window, all of a sudden broke down in the car crying. We called to tell our parents what had happened on the way back, and that Ryan was freaking out, and they told us to just get home safely and quickly. It was late, about 4 or 5 in the morning, but no one slept, and it was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who still owns the cabin, went up that following weekend and said he experienced nothing while there, but did mention bare human footprints that were still lingering about, which he thought were odd, because someone was walking around his property, which bugged him pretty badly. Whatever my one friend saw in the window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping multiple nights and ended up having to seek some help for a couple of weeks, and even had to start taking sleeping medicine. As time went on, he ended up being fine, but still isn't too comfortable sleeping next to a window without a curtain. To this day, I cannot explain what happened and why it seemed to happen to us. I cannot explain what I saw in the lake and what Ryan specifically saw. Nothing has ever happened at that cabin since that night, so we're told from my friend's dad who owns it, which I honestly believe him. I personally have never decided to go back to the cabin, which really makes me sad, because I had a lot of childhood memories there. Tommy and Kevin both have gone back there and been fine, but Ryan refuses to go back, and I'm with him. A lot of people have cabins on this island, so it could have been a prank in the making. That had been busted when Ryan saw the person at the window, or the person possibly wanting to do something worse. I will never be able to explain what was floating in the lake, but the fact that this incident, along with the bare feet and somebody looking at Ryan at night, all happened in the same night, seems like more than a coincidence. While I was a witness to a number of events with the individual in question, I would like to note that the majority of the unsettling behavior and stalking was directed to my coworker and friend at the time, Caroline. She and I became close friends during the summer in question, and while we have since gone our separate ways, we do keep in contact every now and then, and I even asked her if I could share the experience. She agreed, but out of respect to her and to protect both of us, I will leave out some more direct details. Having witnessed the behavior firsthand on many occasions, I understand her hesitation and her terror. This is going to be rather in-depth since there were several encounters over the summer. It was a few years ago now. I lived in a medium-sized college town and I worked at a nearby grocery store. It was small and had been in the community for years, so there were a lot of regulars. Some important backstory with the area. While the town was removed in a sense from the major city, there was a bus line that went directly from the larger city to this town, and it just so happened to drop off right by our store. As it goes with some public transit, especially in this area, there were often homeless people that got off at the stop and would come to the first place with food and drink and a place to wait. So our store. I worked at this store for almost a year and a half as a cashier, then I was promoted to supervisor. Caroline had been working there for several years before me, but we were about the same age. I am a male in my mid-20s now. Caroline is very attractive to me, and a vivacious woman. She was a pleasure to work with and as a good friend, but she also attracted a lot of unwanted and unwarranted attention, especially during night shifts. She has a good head on her shoulders and is an expert at dealing with the creeps and the leering jackasses. This guy, though, he was a whole nother story. It started in late June. I just got to work. I usually worked closing shifts because of school schedule, and during a tag-up meeting with the morning supervisor, Megan, I was informed to make sure I hit the break schedule. Our store was small and yet still incredibly busy with the college and the local community, so we had to balance schedules and breaks and tasks, and things could change at a moment. We had a clipboard with the people on the front end for the day and the estimated break schedule. It also had their in and out time. Supervisors were often also on registers, not just hanging out in the office, so we were at ground zero as it was when things got crazy. I asked Megan why I had to hide it, and she informed me that some guy had been hanging around and she had caught him twice, leaning over the register to look at the schedule. Our store had a big cafe in the front, so it wasn't uncommon for people to linger, sometimes hours at a time. This was especially true for the homeless who had nowhere else to go. As long as they weren't causing trouble, though, we had no reason to kick them out. Anyway, as the night progressed, I noticed this slinky dude with incredibly thick and greasy hair, sort of wandering around. He would walk up and down the aisles, then go to the cafe with nothing, and sit and stare at the registers. Then mosey on outside to the outside tables, then repeat. After about 2 hours of this, I approached and asked if I could help. Expecting him to say no and to scarf her off, I was taken aback when he moved extremely close to me and asked, "Is Caroline working today?" Per our policy, and I believe in some places, the law, we do not give out schedules. I would usually answer if they were currently here, as sometimes we would work directly with vendors and had meetings. This guy was clearly not that, and I had already had a handful of people want to specifically stand at Caroline's line and chat with her, leer at her, and prevent her from working. She was usually good about giving codes when a habitual creeper came in, and I would give her a task to go in the back room and count inventory. I was on edge with this dude, so I told him I could not divulge that information. He looked ready to spit on me. He was also a good 6 inches taller than me, though I could probably take him if the push came to shove. I told Caroline about it later, and though she didn't say anything, I could tell something about this one set her off. She was quiet the rest of the night. Cut to about 2 weeks later, we're doing late night inventory, so we're working way past closing time at 11 p.m. I have myself and 2 other relatively newbies working with me. There were other people from other departments doing inventory, but the bulk of it was on us. At around 1 a.m., while we were neck deep in counting, the store phone starts to ring, and ring, and ring. Normally we wouldn't answer, but I guess store management did, and that was that. About 5 minutes later it rings again, and someone else answers. Then again. I didn't think much of it until it rang a 4th time and I picked up. I answered to say that it was past our operating hours, and to try again in the morning. There was heavy breathing on the other line, and when I said hello, this raspy voice that was super familiar asked if Caroline was there. I said it was past hours and I was about to hang up when he shouted, "Tell me when Caroline works next, or I'm going to come down there and slice your throat, asshole." Needless to say, that pushed a line. I had no idea this was the same dude, but I got a familiar chill. I immediately hung up, told management, and we proceeded to call the cops. We had to do this a lot when drunk homeless people would wander in and steal or get violent. We knew the local cop, Jim, would help, so we had him come by and do a few patrols. That was about it. I would say about an hour and a half later, as we were wrapping up, the creepy dude is at the door, banging all unholy, screaming at us to let him in. There were about 5 other people near the door, all burly men, and they chased him off. I called Jim, and he said he would do another sweep. Of course, after that, we made some charges. Caroline was notified. I may have had issues with some of the store management, but they were really good about keeping us safe. She requested day shifts only, which we tried to accommodate the best we could. But I didn't write the schedule, and our direct team manager had the propensity to be an ass and would sometimes schedule people when they requested that they couldn't work. She often paired me with Caroline, since we were the fastest workers and could get the closing duties done early, so they could save like 30 minutes on labor. There were some other minor incidents, I guess, with him coming in, but he was quickly booted out by management. There was one incident where some dumbass on our team answered the phone and gave this dude Caroline's whole schedule for the week. We had been told not to tell the team why the guy was not allowed in, because it was private. But Caroline ended up telling them, much to the dismay of our team manager. I don't know why she was so pissed. Caroline was trying to get people to understand the gravity of the situation. When that happened, he was there every day. I ended up trading some shifts with her as a cashier and not a supervisor, just so she could get some peace. After a few months of this guy really harassing her at work by lurking and waiting for her to get off, we all pitched in and walked her to her car or drove her home. Or stayed with her until her boyfriend could come pick her up outside. It just kind of stopped, really suddenly. Caroline didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't press, as even though we were close coworkers, it wasn't my business. So in around late August, she's closing with me and we were having a good time, as it was super slow that night. She offers to take care of some duties while I count drawers and close them out. A difficult and somewhat nerve-wracking process, as I had to have the drawer of money out in plain view. The old store had really bad security in that manner. Thank goodness we were never robbed when I was there. One of the seasoned cashiers stays on register to help any customers, while Caroline wipes down the cafe and does the normal closing duties. I to this day do not know what made me do what I did next, but I am partly glad I did, and partly terrified. Caroline was collecting the trash from around the front end and getting ready to take it out back. In the middle of the drawer, being out with money askew, I get this gut feeling that something isn't right. I told her to stop and that I would take the trash out. She gave me a weird look like I was saying she couldn't physically do it, which of course wasn't true. I just felt a sense of unease. She didn't complain. Taking out the trash to the nasty dumpsters out back wasn't like a trip to Disney World after all. I threw the money back in the drawer and locked it, and grabbed the trash to take it out back, while Caroline finished cleaning and Jesse was on the register. The alley where the trash went was pretty awful. It smelled horrible, and despite our best efforts, was always messy. We shared it with a few other businesses, and with the constant wave of homeless and transient, we had frequent dumpster divers. As I am walking down the loading ramp, I hear some noises by the recycling dumpster. But I figured it was just a raccoon or something, as the alley ended near a big ditch and ravine with a little creek. Raccoon City, really. As I am throwing away the trash, some figure darts out into the alley and blocks off the amber glow of the sodium lamp. I look up, startled. It's this dude. He's wearing a really large hoodie, despite the warm weather, and he had his hands tucked into the front pocket. His head was bowed slightly, so he wasn't looking right at me, but I knew instantly who it was. I will never forget that look of hunger and malice in his eyes. Like his obsession with Caroline had consumed every ounce of humanity in him, and turned him sour. We hadn't had a problem in weeks, and we were all under the impression that he was gone, based on things Caroline had hinted at. This guy saunters forward and asks if he can bum a cigarette. I don't smoke and clearly wouldn't do so on the job. Plus I had hands filled with dripping garbage bags. He knew that I knew who he was, so I don't know why he pretended to not know me. I told him that he knew he was not wanted here and that he had to leave. Then I was about to call the cops again. The movement towards me was so sudden, I barely had any time to react. Pouncing forward, hands jumped out of the pockets and onto my shoulders, pushing me against the wall. His next words were throaty and pained, almost as if he was crying in anger. "Are you sleeping with Caroline? She's mine. Keep your hands off my woman." I shouted out of fear and anger, and the store manager, who was in the back room, heard it and came running outside. Then the dude bolted like a bat out of hell. down the ravine and into the creek, where we think he waded through the big pipe, down to where there was a small park he could hide out in. I was so terrified and damn near had a panic attack in the back room. The store manager called the cops and told Caroline what had happened. She broke down and was sobbing uncontrollably. I called her boyfriend Ian and asked him to come get her, told him that she was okay to leave for the rest of the night and didn't need to finish her shift. Jim came out and did a look but couldn't come up with anything. The store leadership talked to Caroline a few days later, I guess, but she didn't want to talk much about the guy. We all got the sense something was up. I filed a report, but my boss, the crappy team manager, told me I shouldn't make another one and definitely shouldn't press charges because it could come back to bite them in the ass legally. Whatever the hell she meant by that. Caroline quit soon after, and I don't blame her. None of us did. Despite mine and a few other managers' best efforts, she wasn't feeling safe at work and kept insisting that there was nothing we could do. I didn't see her for another 7 months as she disappeared pretty much off the face of the earth and online. I know this is getting super long, but there was one last thing that really nails how twisted this guy was. Eventually, while running errands in the city on my day off, I bumped into Ian while out shopping. I asked him how things were going, as we had become rather friendly from the several times that he came in to get Caroline. He said things had been getting better, and that Caroline was getting back to feeling safe. I didn't want to pry, but he let me in on what had been happening. Apparently, the guy was an old friend of Caroline's. He had been in a party and met her once, and had been really friendly, almost too much. He friended her on Facebook and had kept rather quiet, messaging her here and there and wanting to chat. She made it clear that she was dating someone, and he seemed to ignore this and quickly got more aggressive in wanting to just hang out with her. But she didn't want to cause any problems with their mutual friend, so she didn't unfriend this guy. But she did do what she could, which was turn off the chat so he couldn't bug her constantly. She tried to prevent him from contacting her without unfriending him, as she was positive that this would really set him off. She, as I said, was very friendly and didn't want to cause any more problems. But it didn't work. He had apparently kept sending her flowers and stuff to her house, calling from unregistered numbers. How he got her number still isn't sure, and sending almost half-hourly messages on Facebook. And then one day, he snapped. He went postal on her Facebook, tagging his name on pictures of any guy, including her boyfriend Ian as himself. He would then post comments like, "She and I are meant to be. Give me the strength to kill him," in reference to some pictures where she was kissing Ian. "We will be together for eternity," etc. Really disturbing stuff. She ended up blocking him, and her friend talked her out of getting a restraining order for a while, but she ended up getting one after he attacked me in the alley. And that's about it for this guy. I never saw him again after that night, and I quit and moved out of the area a few months after Caroline did. Partly because I was disgusted with my team manager and her lackluster attitude towards the events. She laughed when I told her initially this dude came at me in the alley, and partly because I had quite enough with the crazy creepers. I visit that store now and then to see old friends, and I hope I never have to see that disgusting guy ever again. This experience still gives me the chills to this day. I actually have a few other camp encounters that I can share if anyone is interested. North Georgia is a mighty interesting place. A few years ago, I worked at a Jewish summer camp in North Georgia. As many of you might know, Georgia is a fairly conservative state, as well as being predominantly Christian. There are small Jewish communities and a few summer camps. I'd say this camp was more culturally Jewish than it was religious. There were no religious requirements nor religion-specific focus. Rather, it was a place for kids who were often in the minority to come to a camp that allowed them to meet some other kids like them. Staff came from all over. We had many Australians, lots of Brits, and people from various parts of the USA. Each night at around 10, most of the staff was able to go out to the town for a couple of hours. Enough staff remained behind to watch over the cabins, and we rotated. This particular night, a group of about 5 of us decided to go to a local bar to grab a few beers. It had been a hot day and was a humid night, so we decided to sit outside on the patio. For some backstory on the town, generally, we were extremely well received by the community, despite differences. We brought in lots of revenue for the town during the summer. We bought supplies at the local Walmart and often took the campers on tubing trips or occasionally out to dinner after a long hike on the Appalachian Trail. It was midsummer, so we've been out to the bars in the area many times already in that session. The 5 of us sat around at a table, drinking and discussing the events of the day, as fellow employees typically would after work. About 30 minutes in, a white man in his 20s came up to our table. I distinctly remember a jagged scar on his cheek, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He introduced himself, then he told us that he was having a party that night at his place. "Anyone can come," he said. Black, white, gay, straight, whatever. I found it very odd that he'd opened his speech with that disclaimer. Of course the party should be open to everyone. Why did he feel the need to specify? But we all had a few beers and we were feeling pretty loose. He talked for a bit longer and really nothing seemed off, I guess. We told him we were working at a camp in the area and we couldn't stay out long, so we'd probably be heading back soon. An hour later, our group went out to the parking lot to get into the car. As we approached it, we saw the same guy come out of the shadows. He had a buddy with him with a shaved head. His expression was incredibly hateful. His eyes had changed. He pounded his fist into his hand, then took off his shirt and revealed a poorly inked SS tattoo. My stomach dropped. One of the bigger guys in my group, Kevin, immediately reacted by pulling a knife out of his pocket. At summer camp, most of us staff carried knives. We spent a lot of time building campfires, etc. And asked what they wanted. The original guy started shouting some anti-Semitic remarks and told us that he was going to beat us down. Kevin started walking down toward the two guys, but we pulled him back. He told us his buddies were on the way. Sure enough, some more guys started walking to the parking lot. It's all kind of blurry here. I remember jumping into one of the cars, pulling Kevin with us, and it felt like we were surrounded. Though there were probably only 7 or 8 of them. Rocks were thrown at the car and we sped off. My heart was beating like crazy. We never went back to that bar. On the bright side, when we told the story to the competing bar in town, the bartender lined up 6 shots, cheered us, and said we were always welcome in his bar in that town. We had no more problems in that town itself, but when I took some campers on the 2-day hike up the Appalachian Trail, it was another story. This experience happened to me when I was 14 years old. I hadn't spoken to anyone about the event since it happened. Not even my significant other. I'm 20 years old now and about to double major with my first 2 degrees in psychology and anthropology. Recently, for reasons unknown to me, the memories of this strange happening have resurfaced and are continuing to plague my waking thoughts, as well as my unconscious and subconscious. As we are taught in psychology, talking about this situation could help with repressed trauma, so here it goes. I live in the high desert mountains of Southern California, situated just below the Sierra Nevadas, about 30 minutes west of Mojave. My town is no booming metropolis. At the time, our largest market was a Kmart, one of the last still in business, I might add. And we had only our 4 stoplights in town. This takes place in a subsection of the town about 13 miles away from the shops, banks and restaurants, and a small community largely inhabited by retirees. It's smack dab in the middle of summer and the temperature were well into the high 90s to low hundreds. My nightly routine would consist of walking my Australian Shepherd. However, I would wait until it was almost dark to avoid the heat. I grabbed my phone, a small pocket knife, some headphones, and my pup, and we set out for my nightly walk. My community is also home to a significant amount of equestrian riders as well as cattle ranchers. The trails I walked were designated horse riding trails set between pastures. That night, I had decided to take the horse trail that stretches for approximately 2 miles between back-to-back paddocks. It's basically a long, narrow trail that's between very large backyards. My ending destination, a communal park where all types of horse riders could enjoy various activities on their horses. Making my way through the sandy terrain on the trail, it was nearly dark now. The sky was becoming a deeper shade of blue every time I looked up, and my dog was becoming harder to see. I estimated my arrival at the center to be around 15 minutes from my current position, as I sent a text to my mother. "I'll be there in about 15 minutes. Could you meet me there? I'm too tired to walk back." My mother had replied, "Sure, I'll leave in 10 minutes. Now at this point, I was just outside the entrance, where the Enchanted Forest Trail connects to the straight trail that I was on, sort of like a 3-way intersection. You can either go left in the Enchanted Forest Trail or go straight into the equestrian center. Before I reached the intersection of the trails, I noticed a shift in my dog's behavior as she becomes anxious and seemingly worried. She had her eyes fixated to the forest and stopped dead in her tracks. I played it off as another animal within the forest, like a bobcat or a boar, as they weren't uncommon in my area. I gave her a slight tug on her collar, although she was still incessantly focused on the forest. With a little bit more convincing, I was able to get her moving forward, pushing her on towards where my mother would be waiting for our arrival. Now it was nearly pitch black, with only the moon guiding me with its slow light. There was just the slightest of visibility. It forced me to turn on my cell phone's dim flashlight. Entering the center now, I noticed something that startled me immensely. A very tall person, a man, about 10 to 15 feet into the enchanted forest trail, with his back towards me, standing completely still, his head facing the sky and his hands open, palms pointing in front of him while his arms are at his side. He was tall, approximately 6 feet, slim build, short dark hair, and was wearing what looked like to be blue scrubs, or at least a very thin blue napkin-like material, and was barefoot. What startled me the most was his demeanor and what he was doing. His stance was enough to scare anyone in that setting, but as I approached him slowly, it appeared to me he was shaking, or vibrating, or even slightly convulsing, but doing so while standing up. It didn't seem like he had any control over it, although he remained his balance perfectly. Scared and not entirely sure what to do, I asked him, "Hello, excuse me." I paused momentarily and raised my voice slightly with the next question. "Is everything alright?" When I said that, he stopped shaking altogether, but still doesn't turn around or move another muscle. He just remains in that same creepy position and doesn't even move. For a brief moment, I had thought I might have been imagining this. I glanced down at my dog, and she was also concerned with the state and condition of this man, and began growling quietly. At this point, I knew it wasn't all in my head. When I looked back up, he had moved closer to me, about 7 feet closer or so, now almost on my trail's path. I had only looked at my dog for a split second, and he did without making a sound. He still wasn't facing me either, and his hands were still open, head still facing the sky. I wasn't about to wait and see what this guy was doing, or what his intentions were. So I slowly eased my way past him towards the equestrian center, as quietly as I could, before I felt that I was at a safe enough distance to start sprinting as fast as I could away from this guy. When I reached the first arena of the equestrian center, I looked back into the direction of the forest, completely out of breath. And there he was. The guy was standing on the edge of the trail outside of the forest, standing there still facing me. I was too far away to see his face, and frankly, I didn't want to. I couldn't make out features. All I could see was his silhouette illuminated by the moonlight peeking through the trees in the forest trail. I continued to run with no intention of stopping until I found someone. I had never been so happy to see my nagging neighbor, Penny, and her moody mare. She noticed my distress, but due to her already harsh opinions of me, I had told her I had been on an endurance run and was just out of breath and very tired. I wanted to avoid any small town gossip as much as I could. My mother arrived with an impeccable timing. During the ride home, I broke down in a state of paranoia, distress and panic at what I had just witnessed. My mother didn't know exactly what to make of it, so she recommended that I file a police report. About an hour after getting home, an officer shows up to take my statement. Following up the next day, the same officer claims to have went and checked out the area, but didn't find anyone or anything out of the blue apart from partials of bare footprints. But there's nothing incriminating or suspicious about someone going for a walk without shoes. He played it off as a joke and accused me of being under the influence, but I can assure you, I was completely sober. Nothing ever came out of this. I attended weekly therapy sessions for almost 2 years following this event, and I never went on walks by myself ever again. I had night terrors about the man, and I still do. I still don't know what to make of it. I don't know if I ever will. This happened about 5 years ago when I was 16, and I was attending my last summer at my sleepaway camp in West Virginia. Granted, I was only there for a month, but it was the longest month of my life. My cabin was full of girls that I knew from previous summers, and a girl no one knew named Mary. She was kind of the oddball, and it was obvious after a few days that she isolated herself and had a hard time fitting in. So I tried my best to include her in our normal activities, while the rest of my friends didn't pay her much attention. After about a week, she started clinging to me, which I figured was because she liked me as a new friend, and I was the only one that showed her any attention. Wherever I went, she was kind of just there, always a step behind me, right in my periphery. We were required to take buddies to the bathroom, and whenever I casually mentioned I was going, she would jump up and volunteer to take me. Nothing weird. I started noticing strange habits of hers, though. Whenever we walked to an activity, she would walk next to me, and if she noticed our walking was out of sync, like my right leg went forward when her left leg did, she would skip to adjust it, so we were walking the same way. Now this sounds a little questionable. I thought maybe I was overthinking it, until several of my friends mentioned that they were noticing stuff happening as well, without me saying anything. During meals, we were assigned tables, but even though she sat across the entire dining hall away from me, she never stopped watching. I would go up to the buffet and fill my plate, noticing that as I sat down, she would go up and choose the exact same foods as me while still watching me. This happened with every activity, from art to sports, etc. At this point, I wasn't creeped out yet. I was just a little weirded out by her tendencies. On a Tuesday, this is relevant by the way, I was just starting to ride the horse I was newly assigned during a ring lesson. This horse was a little wild from the winter off and bucked me off, causing me to be forced to stay in the infirmary during the lesson times for the rest of the week. The following week, I watched as Mary went out of her way to request the same horse that I had fallen off of. I was kind of perplexed by this. Of course, the Tuesday of that week, I watched as she threw herself off of the horse and was also forced to stay in the infirmary alone with me. My 1 hour a day that I could escape her was now also taken away. I started to get pretty annoyed by her because no matter what I was doing, she was always there. We had to switch bunks midway through the session and I was genuinely angry when she requested not only the same cabin as me, but also the same bed next to mine. We both chose top bunks that were aligned on the same wall, so my feet were at her head. I started to notice even weirder things. I was writing a letter home one day and felt like I was being watched. I looked to my right and I saw Mary was sitting facing forward, but her head is cocked to the side, staring at me with a demonic-like smile. My stomach dropped. A couple nights after that encounter, I woke up with the same feeling of being watched. It was pitch black, but I grabbed a flashlight to go walk to the bathroom since I was already up. But no. I turned over with my light to see Mary standing next to my bed with her head at my level watching me sleep. Just standing in the middle of the cabin staring. I was speechless. I just figured maybe she needed someone to take her to the bathroom. I start to leave for the bathroom and she follows, but I was thoroughly creeped. Stuff like that kept happening for the rest of the session, but when her parents finally came to get her, I refused to even look at her to say goodbye. I have never been so happy to leave a place in my life. I can't express the level of creepiness over typing this, but I can literally say I felt like I was in danger when I was near her. I never want to figure out why she was seemingly obsessed with me.